Greetings, children. Monday, the 1st of April, 1 minute past 1 p.m. here, central, where I am in the Yucatan, or on the Mayan Riviera in Bacala. Very happy to be joined today with my co-anchor, Scotty Sachs. Before I do, just to raise the specter of the upcoming total eclipse of the sun to those of you who know and have been following this very enigmatic narrative that's unfolding. We do have a pretty extraordinary phenomena kicking off on the 8th of April. I'm just going to borrow a slide stolen from somewhere. 2024 total eclipse of the sun, April 8th. That path of the total eclipse, as many of you will know, passes directly over 7 towns known as Nineveh. We call that the Nineveh line. The last total eclipse of the sun that occurred in North America was in 2017, and that came in another direction and crossed over 7 towns in the US and one in I think, Canada, called Salem. So the Salem and the Nineveh lines intersect to create the signature of God that was prophesied in many of the biblical texts as being the time of great unfoldment. So whether you're given to prophecies from the Bible or from Nostradamus or from the Hopi or from the Eagle and Condor, from many different prophetic disciplines, all seem to be intersecting more or less in the Americas right now, this month, April into May, June of this year. There is a reason why at the collective unconscious level, the level of the Gestalt, that we are in a quandary, and there's a deep kind of perplexity in the minds and the hearts of millions, hundreds of millions, possibly billions of people around the world. There is the impending image of war and doom on the horizon. There is global financial calamity. There is psycho-spiritual meltdown, the terminal demise of the 500 years of dominion by the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican conspiracy, so to speak, which really indentured all living systems into fictions, into treasury bonds as we would have it today. So we are living indeed at a time of great shift, and it would appear that the nexus point is imminent, is this year. I think we would be foolish to ignore all of the signs, put it that way. The important thing, of course, to remember is that it is the living gospel, the living testament that matters, which means to say you and I, and the way in which we conduct ourselves as living sons and daughters of God. And to that end, I would very much like to keep a sense of the spirit with this kind of broadcast that we're making. We're frontline activists here, throwing rocks at the citadel and demanding an end of evil empire and all of that. So all of the voices we bring forward, whether they're political or military or intelligence or academic, it's all geared towards ending the evil empire, the parent corporation. But the most important point is the alchemization in our own hearts and minds of how we then take the mantle as living men and women of the living soil, so to speak, step into pure truth and right action, and how we then do the bidding, as I've been saying for many, many months now, do the bidding of the wisdom keepers, the flame keepers of old, who have always, ever invited us to dream wisely. And it really does come down to that. It may sound a little bohemian, a little abstract, but the power of the human imagination is everything. The reason why the Midnight Masons that underpinned the founding fathers and the various edicts and Genesis treaties that created the United States of America and all corporations masquerading as governments around the world today. They're all underpinned by spells and bonds, by treaties, by symbols, by marks, by signatures, by seals. All of that is hocus pocus. It's all witchcraft. At the end of the day, I am the living man. You are the living man and the living woman of the living soil, the sons and daughters of God. And I, in my own advocacy and political activism, prefer to keep spiritualizing and alchemizing the processes inwardly. This axiomatic event of the total eclipse of the sun is indeed something written into prophecy and written into the fear-mongering, and the doomsday merchant will speak to this as being a mark of the apocalypse. It is quite the contrary. It is a point at which we are invited to stop looking out there at the dielectric universe and fearing the totems, fearing the eclipses, as we were culturally programmed to do. It is time for us to not look outwardly, either in celebration or in fear, but to move our focus, our gaze to the central sun, the inner sun, the Christed mantle, so to speak, which is where the second coming emerges. So that said, I'm going to bring Scotty in. Your brief comments, Scotty, on where we find ourselves staring somewhat into the abyss.
Good morning, Sasha. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
All right. Good to see you, Sasha. Good to see all of our AGN audience. You called them your kiddos, but good to see everybody today. And Sasha, as I'm listening to your monologue, which belongs on late night television, blows Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert's monologue away for sure. I can't help but think, Sasha, in a very kind of positive way, we are winning certainly the information war by virtue of us broadcasting today and us being able to get this word out, and the many other content creators we're affiliated with. We are clearly winning the information war. I said that in 2021 when we were touring on the Arise tour. The spiritual war, Sasha, by virtue of the Great Awakening and people on the left, on the right, coming together. I feel it. I see it in my own life. Friends of mine that were sleeping are becoming wide awake. So I believe we're winning that spiritual war, the information war. The kinetic war is another story. Sadly, war is one of the things they know how to do best and profit from. And we have to go through these last final battles, I think, to get to the other side. But Sasha, also the financial war that is imminent, sound money, precious metals backed currency versus central bank digital currency. I have no doubt, I'm 100% confident we're going to win that war as well. So, Sasha, we're winning the battles and we're winning the wars now.
Okay, I'm having difficulties hearing you, Scotty, just so you know. The signal is not great. But nonetheless, just one slide here that I want to pull up. And I think it does perfectly. I don't know if I'm being hacked. Oh dear. I hope I'm still on. Joanne in the back room there in the green room, give me a thumbs up. Can you hear me? Am I
Sasha,
back on?
I hear you, Sasha, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Which to me says it all. I'm so sorry, that was not the correct slide. Good Lord, friends, we are definitely having some serious glitches in the studio. All right, you know what? We're going to forego the slides. Scotty, you've got, I think, an odd signal at your end. Joseph, I'm going to bring you straight in if you don't mind, and I'm hoping that the signal is going to sustain. Good Lord, good Lord. We're going in and out. All right, I'm going to read Joseph Lambardi, Managing Director of Iron Hawk Financial. Joe has a personal reason for choosing the financial sector to help small business owners and small families protecting their assets, albeit with traditional investment vehicles that many of us believe will not be around much longer. He has a vast network of connections at banks, law firms, and accounting firms, giving him a finger on the pulse of the industry. And of course, for most of you looking in, that's the critical piece right now. What are we looking at in respect of global financial meltdown? Well, as someone right in the eye of the financial storm, Joe is able to speak to us about what we're all hearing as an impending collapse and how he deals with that threat and what he genuinely believes is coming and what, if anything, citizens still in the financial system can do. So, Joseph, you're very welcome to AGN today.
Thank you for having me, Sasha.
Joe, please just give us your overview of where we stand, status quo, 2020.
Yeah. So I believe we're going to see a lot of volatility. We have been seeing it over the last 12 months. We saw the market up about 40%, and I believe that's called melting up. So I believe they either have a plan for a collapse, whether it's to blame one political side or the other. I believe a lot of people are going to be in trouble if all their money is in taxable assets like business equity, real estate, 401ks, SEPs, and IRAs. I think people need to diversify a lot of their taxation, liquidity, market exposure, but they also have to worry about inflation. So there's a lot of risks that the American people is facing right now, and they have to try to find and combat those risks with IRS codes, strategies, options. That's not the general mainstream way that our parents invested.
Hey, Joseph, it's Scotty Sachs. How are you?
Good. How you doing, brother?
Good, good. Well, while Sasha's trying to come back, I'll pick up the ball and run with it. If you don't mind, I'm going to jump right into a question for you.
Okay.
So I was saying in the opening that I believe we're winning the information war, the spiritual war, the kinetic wars that are going on are unfortunate. People are dying, but we have to go through those. I want to ask you about the financial war. There's obviously major battle for control of the financial system. Sound money, asset-backed, precious metals-backed currency versus central bank digital currency. I don't believe central bank digital currency will take hold and see the light of day as a global system. The BRICS won't have anything to do with it. That's evidenced. They're already in an asset-backed system. So where do you see America falling in the end? How do we have trading partners, and how do we do business with the rest of the world if they're on asset-backed currency and we're not?
Whew, that is a great question. I see our country trying to come up with solutions to that problem by having some sort of currency trade platform. If it gets that far, I believe our influence across the country is way deeper than we can even imagine. We spend $212 trillion on military, which is 10 times higher than any other country. And I don't think it has to do with building bombs. I think it has to do with buying influence. So I don't think the BRICS is going to stand a chance in regards to changing the U.S. petrodollar long term. I think there's battles and wars, and I think we are definitely losing on paper a lot of battles, but I feel like we're going to win the war. If we happen to lose the war as a country, then there's going to be some sort of currency devaluation, which we're going to have to live with. The BRICS wanted it to be like $50 or 50, for every one BRIC currency dollar. I don't see that coming to fruition. I don't see us being lower than Mexico's, peso to U.S. currency transfer. So I think we are going to be fine because of our military. And when I say our military, really our influences we have with all the alphabet groups across the country.
Well, interesting analysis. I think winning the financial war means return to sound money, what JFK started. I'd like to see finished with asset-backed gold and silver-backed currencies. And if that happens, we certainly won the war, because they want to implement a central bank digital currency system where there's no cash. I have seen the rainbow currency, the new Treasury Reserve notes, not Federal Reserve notes, that are already printed and sitting at banks. God knows when they'll be released, and we'll actually get onto this new system. But it's very interesting to note that 70% of the world, 40 countries representing 70% of the world, have applied to the BRICS system, financial system. So I think we're operating in two systems side by side. We've got the central bank fiat system on one side. We've got the BRICS nations growing stronger every day as they admit 40 more countries into their financial system. They're not using the SWIFT system. They're on a different platform completely. And I'll tell you, you'd find it interesting, Joseph. I'm currently in Mexico. I can't sell a dollar here. None of the banks want the dollar. You have to go to a currency exchange, and the best rate you'll get is just under 16 pesos to the dollar. When I first started coming here, I was getting 23, 24 pesos to the dollar. So definitely de-dollarization is happening. The dollar is weakening all over the world. As I travel and see, the dollar is not wanted. I go to other countries, the banks no longer want our dollar. That says it all to me. Doesn't that tell you a story if the banks around the world don't want the dollar? I'm talking right off the street, walk into a bank, name the country, they don't want a US dollar anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is not good for us. We have had the luxury of being the petrodollar for decades, and the go-to currency through mismanagement, poor management, whether it was intentional or not, is up for debate. It has caused rifts around the country, or the world, should I say, in regards to, we are no longer the ultra mega powerhouse that we have been for half a century plus. And that will have some consequences. But I feel like most of those consequences are going to be mostly on the corporate level. I feel like individuals within the country, pretty big, 360 million Americans, we have a big enough culture and population where no matter what happens, whatever they decide to be the currency, we should be just fine. Can we get goods and services as cheap as we could in the past? Probably not. But is that going to have a huge impact on our way of life? We still technically have the strongest military. The government still has a lot of power and influence across the world. We have these alphabet agencies, which I'm not saying I like them, but they do play a role in our global presence, and those still exist too. So I think there's definitely risks, but I feel like we should be in a good spot in the near future, whether they decide to go to CDC, whether they decide to stay in the fiat currency, whether they decide to go to gold back. Because in 1971, when we got off the gold standard, it didn't change much if you look historically. So I think more people are nervous and fearful of the unknown and change than I think the negative consequences will be, not if, but when we get off of the fiat currency.
I think the only thing that changed...
Joe, guys, sorry, Scotty, let me jump in here.
Sure.
Apologies, we completely went down. Our Starlink and 3 other independent connections to networks went down. So I'm back, but I'm downstairs in the kitchen. Joe, you and your networks rely on very traditional banking vehicles. Maybe Scotty asked this question, but do you believe these will realistically hold up through summer into autumn this year? Or are we seeing the impending collapse of all traditional vehicles?
Yeah, most of my clients, I have 2,000 clients, over $1 billion of rollover protection I've done in my career. They're doing strategies about around 176 years that survived the Civil War, World War I, the Great Depression, World War II. And the safest place to put your money, in my opinion, and historically, is not gold and silver or crypto. It's actually with insurance companies. I know that might sound crazy, but they're the safest place. That's where I rolled over my 401ks from old employers before I started my own firm. My SEPs, my pensions. It's I want to be where all the millionaires, billionaires, and now to say trillionaires, which is weird to say, but that's where they have all their money. They don't have it in banks. I believe the banks are going to fail. But when you take a look at the great collapse of the Great Depression, where banks were closing left and right, nobody lost a dollar inside of insurance companies. It's just the laws, the regulations. Right. They don't do fractional lending. They have to keep every dollar per dollar. When you take a look at that, historically, those people won. And I want to do what winners do. So I advise my clients and personally put most of my retirement assets, my liquid assets, my savings account is all inside of my overfunded life insurance policy.
Right. On the eve of the 2008 collapse, Joe, I had the great Professor Bernard Lietaer, the man who created the convergence mechanism that is the euro, and then lobbied against it when he discovered that the globalists had set him up and his economics unit to create a convergence mechanism. He'd warned them it was an interim currency, and after 15 odd years, they'd have to replace it with a permanent currency. But when they unveiled the euro, he was horrified on the day in Brussels when they unveiled it as the permanent currency, much against all of his advisement. And so he resigned from the Brussels team and lobbied against his own creation for the rest of his life. But on the eve of the collapse in 2008, he was staying with me in London at my home in preparing for a week before the most important summit of his life, where he, the governor of the Bank of England, and the chairman of the Federal Reserve were meeting in St. James's Palace in London to discuss the future of the global economy. I learned a great deal from Professor Lietaer. We were very friendly up until his death, and I learned a great deal about macroeconomics. I asked him the question on the eve of the 2008 collapse, and about 6 months before, I went out warning people about it at his behest. It happened on cue, but what I asked him, Joe, was in the event of a global calamity, financial meltdown, where is the real value? Where is it to be had? And he was categorical about it. He said it's in the living soil. He said arable land, primary water, under the custodianship of a fellowship of good humans in a place of extraordinary beauty would be the highest value of anything at any time going through any economic meltdown. So what are your considerations there? I understand the more abstract nature of banks and bonds and securities and all the abstractions and the spells and the bonds connected to global economics. But what are your thoughts personally about the living soil and a return to the soil and to the land?
So I'm married. I have 3 children. My biggest concern is protection. So we have guns, we have ammo. I have hundreds of pounds of food. I have a garden. I have alarm system cameras. I live in a safe neighborhood, cul-de-sac. So I believe that he's spot on. I mean, if you take money out of the equation, what is the most important thing in the world? I mean, even with money in the equation, but really taking it out from a need of survival, it would be family, would be like-minded people that share the same ethics, morals, respect, good, God-fearing people nearing a beautiful area that has clean water, healthy food. There's nothing better than that. No mansion, no Lamborghini, no airplane or Lamborghini boat can compare to peace, serenity, camaraderie, acceptance. That is by far the most blissful way you can possibly live your life. Given the fact that we do live, or I live in America, where we have a debt society, slavery. We have a tax society, slavery. We're owned by the U.S. corporation of the United States. We're born into debt. My house, many of my houses, I don't own the land, the government does. So I'm renting the land that my home sits on and where my children are being raised. And it's sad when you look at how evil the United States of America's laws, rules, they bottle water sell you. They can't even give you water for free, but yet they send $50 billion, $100 billion to go murder innocent women and children across the world. It's really sad. But you know, the safest play for me financially right now is to have an asset that's tax-free, have an asset that's sue-proof, have an asset that's divorce-proof in some states. Historically, last 20 years, double-digit tax-free returns, non-direct recognition. When you pull money out of it, it doesn't affect the growth of the asset. Meaning, if I had 100 grand, I pull out 99. I'm still earning interest on 100 grand in the market, so I could take that 99 and make money elsewhere. My clients are waiting for a huge collapse because the money they have in my strategy is cash. So they're able to buy whatever they want at extreme discount, which is finance 101, is to buy low, sell high. And most people have an inverse relationship with reality and investing. You wouldn't go to Walmart and pay $20 for a strawberry. If it was $1, you would try to buy it for 50 cents. When it comes to investing, people are now buying Bitcoin when it's at 70,000, when it's the worst time to buy high. It's just the inverse relationship to what people do in their normal lives and what they do when it comes to investing.
Beautifully stated, Joseph. Thank you. So those words are very, very precious. I've just spent an hour and a half this morning speaking to a group headed by an individual who I regard as the alpha point in the highest jurisdictions of all law forms. And she's a remarkable human being. I won't name her here and put her in the crosshairs, but I know that we're working together on an extraordinary event later this year of piercing the corporate veil and returning a substantial tranche of land in Middle America, tethering it back to the original land patents of the First Nation peoples, and ridding all of the securities and the spells and bonds hovering above that land that prevent, the allodial title, all of that stuff. So piercing the corporate veil, so to speak, in my view, becomes the critical piece here. To me, the opportunity this year, outside of taking immediate existential strategies, the ones you are recommending, outside of that, I think everyone looking in who has a pulse and a brain has got to start to think in terms of reclaiming their straw man, no longer allowing themselves to be indentured into that satanic, frankly, the word is satanic fictionalizing of living systems, because that's where the parent corporation came in. That's where the Vatican complex came in. That's where governments, or these corporations masquerading as governments comes into the picture. And don't forget, we are the collateral. We are the security. The fabric of living souls is the collateral, and we are being harvested. So is that not the source code of this old paradigm that we need to consciously excise ourselves from?
Yeah, I mean, you look at old biblical texts, the Anunnaki, the fallen angels that came to start the human race 200,000 years ago, how they farmed humans. It's very similar. I mean, we are owned. Our actions, we are owned. We are not trusted enough to manage our own affairs when it comes to taxation, when it comes to divorce, when it comes to child custody. It's like the government looks at us as weak, feeble, replaceable. I mean, they send our troops over to die in wars over oil or biblical value props, and it's really sad. It's we need to understand that we're God's children. We have the power. There's nobody above us or below us. We are all equal. We're all made in God's picture and His view, and it's this whole I'm better than you, power, control, that's all the devil. That's all satanic. And if we realize that we can come together and be equal and treat each other with respect, ethics, and morals, the world would be a better place. But we're brainwashed on division. division on your race, division on your religion, division on your gender, division on your sex, division on your favorite sports team, division on your politic view. If we all stay segregated and separate within a society, we cannot band together and grow as one. And if they keep us down low while they grow, they not only spread more powerful, knowledgeable than us, but it actually makes us we're defenseless with their technology they have that are 20 years farther than what they're giving out to the public. The looking glass, if you looked into that, how the Simpsons predicted everything. So we know there's some sort of power and entity and energy and karmaticness that we are just not aware of, whether it's our third eye, whether it's our pulmonary gland, whether it's our relationship to our God, whether it's something, but they are not allowing the average citizen to come close to the level of power so that we can be compliant and controlled and manipulated by the powers that be.
Very good. Joseph Lombardi, God bless you, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on AGN today.
Have a great day.
Friends, with more than 33 years of service in the United States military, General Michael Flynn, America's general, the military career that culminated as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and as the nation's highest serving military intelligence officer. General Flynn retired from the Army in 2014, and as a private citizen, he went on to serve in a variety of business, educational, and non-profit roles, including the support for veterans organizations around the country that he continues working with to this day. He is the current chairman of America's Future, a 501c3 organization committed to preserving the liberties of American citizens since 1946, protecting the God-given freedom of the individual, the private enterprise capitalist economic system, and thwarting overreach into the lives of private citizens, touching on exactly what we've just been speaking about momentarily. General Flynn's public service included selection and service as a foreign policy advisor to several Republican U.S. presidential candidates and subsequent appointment and service as the national security advisor to the great 45th president of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. He is a national best-selling author, recently co-writing The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare with Boone Cutler, another AGN speaker. And General Flynn holds 3 master's degrees and has received numerous military intelligence and law enforcement awards. Maybe most importantly to him, he is married with 2 grown sons and several grandchildren, and we here will gladly jump in freezing Pacific waters to surf at dawn. General Flynn, you are so very welcome, sir.
Thanks, Sasha. Thank you so much for having me. You guys are great. I was actually here for the last tail end of Joseph there. What a great interview, and he's exactly right. I mean, you know, there is an attack on our liberties and our freedoms here, and I mean. Anyway, I mean, I get up this morning and get sent a video of Bill Maher talking about me on his show. I think it was on Friday night, you know, and I say to myself, what is it about me that they can't, I'm like living in their heads. And, you know, he was talking to, so, I mean, I know we got other things we want to talk about, but this is kind of what's on my head right now, right in the sort of front and center for my life. You know, these people, they just can't let me go for some reason. And partly because I am standing up and I'm speaking out against the tyranny that we are facing. It's very real. You know, it's, I use the phrase, there's, you know, 2% of the passionate will defeat 98% of the indifferent 100% of the time. And we must stop being indifferent. We must stop being indifferent in this country. Otherwise, that passionate 2% that is on the left, it's not a big number. It's a smaller number. It's bigger than I think people realize, but it's still relatively a smaller number. The majority of people in this country want to continue to have our constitutional rights and want to continue to live in a free country. But if we're not careful, that 2% will take over the 98% who are indifferent to politics. And so maybe that's why they come after me. So here's Bill Maher talking to the former Secretary of Defense under Donald Trump, Mark Esper, who I have never met. And they're talking about me as a threat. but guys like Mattis and guys like Kelly and people like Esper, who all undermined the president of the United States while they served him. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me. So anyway, that's my.
I have to say, General, let Bill Maher continue chugging on his cigars in his moth-eaten winged armchair and wheezing bohemian rhetoric. I mean, he's long, been against the real core narrative, but I think it's because he belongs to that liberal intellectual enclave who, frankly, have become the enablers of the satanic status quo. It's insidious, but it seems to be a fact. I have to say, General, for frontline activists like myself, you're the canary in the cage. We look to you. If General Flynn's still standing, we're okay. I'm assuming to some extent you look to Donald J. Trump and say, well, one way or the other, if he's still standing, you're okay. Let's face it, that man is bearing the brunt of evil empire, bodily, mind, body, and soul. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And, they were making it sound, and people make this sound like, we're some kind of mega cult and we're only loyal to Trump. We're not loyal to the country or to the Constitution. I mean, that is so far from the truth. And that is but that's the message. That's the narrative that they will continue to spew. And you're going to see another narrative coming here because I can feel it. And I've seen some early indications of it where they're going to start to really charge at this and further put a bigger wedge in the divide between what I call the religion and state divide. Like this, you're going to hear people say there should be no connection between religion and state, that they are separate. They're totally separate. And you can't have the two meet. And we're going to see more and more of that. And the reason why is because they want to put fear into a segment of our society, principally the Christian segment of our society, which is the largest voting bloc in the country. So anybody who has paid any attention to what has happened to Donald Trump, former president of the United States of America, won overwhelmingly in 2016. And as far as I'm concerned, won overwhelmingly in 2020. I mean, the amount of corruption and fraud that still is in our election system. So they're going after President Trump in all these different cases. And you start to look at and you scratch beneath the surface and you say, my God, why are they after this man so desperately? And the reason, and this is why, I mean, because I've told people, and I've been very public, and I've said this to Trump, I could have been his worst nightmare. But I knew from the beginning that this was not about Trump. This was about taking over our country and bringing and taking us down another path towards socialism. Like I say to some, we are moving towards becoming the United Socialist States of America instead of the United States of America. And I think that that's very real. So initially, after the great victory of 2016 by Trump, it was, we got to get this Flynn guy out of there right away. And they used all kinds of tools. I know you're aware of this movie that I got coming out. People can go to flynnmovie.com. And I don't know if you have any kind of, like promotion code or anything like that, but I definitely want to help people like you and your show, because Arise, the guerrillanews.com, right? AriseGuerrillanews.com. I mean, we have got to take the citizen journalists in our country and raise our voices up, because the mainstream media, the corporatocracy, places like Hollywood, Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, they don't care. No, that's the 2% that I talked about. They're going to go after Donald Trump because Donald Trump, it got in the way of essentially the continuation of the takeover of the United States of America. That I know. And so when I stand up for Donald Trump, I'm standing up for America. I'm standing up for what I believe in the constitutional republic that we have. And so I really, and I deeply and sincerely appreciate you saying, as long as you're still standing, Flynn, then we're okay. Because I will tell you, you're exactly right. The whole adage of get Flynn to get Trump, and there was some even stronger language used by Deputy FBI Director McCabe. First we, F Flynn, and then we F Trump, right? Excuse me. And so these guys are serious because they're undermining the very the duly elected president of the United States of America. Now, I will tell you emotionally, where was my head emotionally when I left the White House? My head was, I had to get my head clear, and I had to really think about all the things that were happening at that moment. Because believe me, nobody's been in that position except for me and my wife, and my wife is, you mentioned my family, and my wife now of almost, we've been together since we were 13 years old. So we're going on almost 44 years of being married together. So when I look at that, yeah, there was an emotional period. But then all of a sudden, when I started to see something happen, and I'm like, wow, this is much, much worse than even what Donald Trump is going to have to go through. When we talk about Russiagate, I mean, people abuse me. Bill Maher talking about me on Friday night, this past Friday night. Here we are. That, the Russiagate began back in 2016. So this is now 8 years going on where they're afraid of Mike Flynn. And they fear me because they don't want a guy like me. They didn't want me then. Barack Obama told Trump, don't take this guy. And then now Bill Maher is still making me sound like I'm some crazy guy. Don't bring this guy back into government. Why? Because you're talking to an incorruptible person. Donald Trump is incorruptible. They couldn't give him enough money. Why? Because he's a very profitable businessman. He's a good, strong businessman. He's a guy. You got me on a soapbox here, Sasha. But Trump is a guy. So and believe me when I say this, Trump is a guy who did not need to go become a politician. But that's exactly what we need in this country. We need people who are not politicians to become leaders in this country. Trump is a leader. Trump loves this country. He's the first president in my lifetime, and probably since, I don't know when, I don't even know how far back it goes, that did not get our country involved in a new war. He made our economy so strong. He put the safety and security of the American people before the people over in the Middle East or the people over. We'd have never had what happened in Afghanistan had Donald Trump stayed in office. The surrender and the retreat behind, and leaving Americans behind enemy lines. We still have Americans held hostage by Hamas, yet we're going to build Hamas a port. Right. So Trump is somebody who is incorruptible. He cannot be bought. Believe me, they will try to buy you. As soon as you go into Washington, D.C. as a political person, as soon as you make governor in a state, they whisper in your ear and they say, hey, we've got a deal for you. And then they bring you in, they draw you in. That's why these people go to Washington, D.C., filled with piss and vinegar. And then they all of a sudden, they shut down, they quiet down. They don't fight like we want our politicians to fight for us at the local and the state and the federal level. We want our politicians to do our bidding. Why? Because that's what citizens should expect in a constitutional republic like the United States of America. I didn't go into Washington, D.C. I didn't get involved in. You think I like this politics crap? God help me. My family has been abused. This movie that people, and I want people to see this movie, FlynnMovie.com. Help out Sasha, help out Arise, Guerrilla, News.com. I want people to see this film because in this film, they're going to see really a story of survival and how to fight back, how to stand up, step up and speak up, how to fight back. We have to stand our ground. America in its own essence, the essence of an American are people who love this country. We don't like a corrupt government. We don't like the government getting involved in our lives. We don't like any of that. What we want is our government to do what they're supposed to do, right? There's some safety and security. There's some military things that we got to have. We got to be prepared for. If somebody punches us in the nose, we got to take care of some diplomatic things for the federal government overseas. There's some commercial trade and stuff that's got to be done. States and local levels, at the county level in particular, they're the ones that are supposed to be making sure that our roads are squared away. We don't have taxes on taxes on taxes for every damn thing you got. We don't want the government in our lives. We don't want the government peering into our into our bedroom windows. We don't want the government, telling me how to raise my children or forcing me to send my children to a public school that I pay for, and they're teaching them. They got these books in elementary schools that teaches about gay sex with, how to give. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But yet here we are, right? Here we are.
Here we are. Well, General, let me just say, we're going to get to your film momentarily, and we're very excited about that. We've got something to play on that momentarily. I just wanted to ask you, whilst we've got you, I've spent some time with members of the Trump family in private retreat in recent weeks. I've spoken with Clay Clark at length about this, and to close mutual friends of the former president. My question to you, General Flynn, and sorry to put you on the spot here, if indeed that does do it, but the question that keeps arising, I'm having conversations with people all around the world. People, generally speaking, love Donald Trump, but do not understand this piece. They do not understand the Operation Warp Speed piece. This was the tweet that went out recently. The pandemic no longer controls our lives. The vaccines that saved us from COVID are now being used to help beat cancer, turning setback into comeback. Now, that's a quote taken from the opposition, but Trump's response was, "You're welcome, Joe, 9-month approval time versus 12 years that it would have taken you." Is that just sardonic humor? And when do you believe Trump is likely to face the American people, and indeed by extension the people of the world, and arguably confess that he was also stitched up at the front of this by the Fauci-Gates element? Because we all know what we know about what has happened as a direct result of vaccines wholesale.
Yeah.
It is not a healthy scenario. Do you have any commentary on that you can offer?
Yeah, I do. And I don't think he was also stitched up by his vice president. And to a degree, that comes out in my film. So I do believe he was, as you say, stitched up. And you can define that for your audience. I know what it means. I would tell you that I do believe that Donald Trump, he believes what he believes. He believes what he wrote. I don't think that he has been advised, wisely on this kind of an issue. I don't know if it's impacted him personally. The vaccines have impacted me and my family personally. I personally have lost friends who took the vaccine, and the only common denominator of their death has been the vaccine. These are people that were relatively healthy, that were my age. They didn't have any problems. They didn't have heart problems. They didn't have cancer problems. And all these things were exacerbated, and then they're dead now. And the only common denominator is they took the damn vaccine. And there's all kinds of evidence now about the vaccine. So I think when he's going to have to come to some level, it's post the convention, and as we go into the November election, there are going to be debates that will be held, and whether they're with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, I don't know. I don't know what the Democrats are going to do. I got to believe that they're planning something. They're up to no good. They're up to no good because Joe Biden could not withstand a debate with Donald Trump. But during those debates, if I were on their team, I would raise this issue. But if they raise this issue, it's also a lick on them, because the Democrats have to be careful about raising this issue, because if they do, because it was Joe Biden that issued the mandates that said, you're going to have to do this. In fact, I'm watching I'm a basketball fan. I'm watching some of the games yesterday, and I'm watching commercials, and they're talking about how school children, we have to get mandatory. We got to get these shots into every single kid. We got to get the shots into babies that are newborns. And I'm thinking to myself, so they're mandating these shots. Trump didn't mandate the shots. He's got some excuses, I say, and I'm not one good for excuses of anything, but he's got some things that he could state that he did not force us to do. He gave us the idea that you could use other alternative medicines like ivermectin, hydrochloroquine. So he had some of that. And he made it so vaccines were an individual choice type decision and not mandatory, where this administration made it mandatory. So if the Democrats are going to come after him about that prior to going into the November election to try to sway some number of people away from him. Now I would advise them to do that. I would, but they have to be careful because of what they've decided. The other side of that is, and this is really, and this is a difficult thing, because again, I have people that I lost that I know, that would be otherwise alive. So can I look past that? It's hard for me, but I will tell you that there's an awakening going on in our country, and I don't know whether it's, coming from on high, but our country is going through one of the greatest challenges of our country's history right now. And if we don't get this right, if we don't put and again, I used to introduce Trump during campaign events in 2016, where I was out there running with him, right? And I used to introduce him as the most imperfect guy that you're going to find running for president of the United States. People would go nuts. 10,000, 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, auditoriums filled with people, and everybody would go, yeah, that's what we want. We want a guy. We want a guy who's honest, who clearly loves this country. What the one big thing is that we have got to make sure that if our country, because right now we're in World War III, we are in World War III. We're not getting ready for World War III in Europe. I mean, there's talks of nuclear weapons over there already. And, in Europe, we got with the Middle East, we got China all over the place. We're not waiting for World War III to happen. It's not going to be like in the movies, folks, like World War I or World War II. We are in World War III now. And so we have got to understand that. So what do we want as a president? Do we want this guy that can't complete a sentence, or whoever else they decide to run in his place? Because if they decide to run somebody in his place, trust me, folks, if you think Joe Biden's over on the left, the next person that runs in his place is going to be somebody who's going to take us all the way to total socialism for the United States of America and completely away from the Constitution. And we're going to see it happen in spades, because it already is happening. Or do we want a guy like a President Trump, who I know will grow the economy? He's already proven that. He will work to keep us out of war. He will use his leadership skills to speak to other world leaders, and on a strong American platform. I mean, people need, if you didn't watch the interview between Vladimir Putin, President Putin, and Tucker Carlson, go back and watch it. The thing that was most stark in that interview for me is that Putin said he hasn't spoken to the White House in 2 years. Yep. We're talking about nuclear war. Biden's even said it. The leadership of NATO has talked about the use of nuclear weapons. I mean, if we don't have the two leaders going, hey Vlad, we need to calm this down. We need to slow this train down. We can't have this. Well, we don't have somebody in the White House to do that right now. That's the kind of leadership that we need in the presidency and around the president. We don't need these mamby-pamby politicians who are stuffing their pockets constantly, because they are. Believe me, they are. Yeah. There's many of them that are bought and paid for. We can't have this. So if the Bill Maher's of the world and all the media want to call me crazy, I'm crazy for this country. I love this country. I didn't go fight my enemies overseas because I hated them. I went over there because I love this country. I love my family. I love my children and grandchildren. And I was given something on a silver platter by my own father and mother, that my father served in World War II and Korea. I have 9 brothers and sisters. I have children and grandchildren. I give a shit about this country. Excuse my Irish. And we are losing this country. We're losing this country. I have people come up to me, and I'll stop with this. I have people come up to me all the time, thousands and thousands of people, and they tell me, I'm afraid for what's happening. I'm afraid. And I say, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid of my government. And I'm like, what are you doing about it? What can you do about it? And then we have a conversation about that. We should not be afraid of our government, but yet we have people in this country that are, because of everything that we've been talking about. So I appreciate being on with you. And I think we're live. Are we live?
No, we're live, General. And God bless you for every single thing you've said. I think it's stunning. And stand by, General, because I'm just going to play a clip from the film and then a couple of questions toward that end. Friends, watch this.
president's former national security advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleading guilty today to lying to the FBI.
Flynn knew exactly how the system worked. He knew exactly what the intel world had been up to. He understood its funding. They had to get rid of Flynn.
There was a moment where I just felt like I was drowning. And so I'm in there with these other political appointees. They're all supposed to go in there and tell what they believe to be the truth. What they did was they took my assessment and they wanted me to change it. And I was like, I'm not changing it.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
President Obama said, but I do have one specific recommendation. Stay away from Michael Flynn. He's bad news.
Over time, instead of being pounded down below the surface of the ocean, we started to fight. I'm now above the surface.
Stunning.
Wow.
Can't wait. And we'd love to participate in a syndicated premiere of that film. Scotty Sachs, for your crimes for having spent many decades as a mainstream media journalist and pundit, I give you the good general.
General Flynn, it's good to see you again. Saw you a couple of weeks ago at Clay Clark's podcaster retreat. And, sir, you answered there why you live rent-free in their heads, why Obama went after you, why Bill Maher's talking about you. You answered the question. I think you forgot what you said, maybe. You said, I know where the bodies are buried, and I know who buried them. Pretty powerful statement. By the way, probably the best book since The Creature of Jekyll Island. G. Edward Griffin's Creature of Jekyll Island. Great book. Thank you for all that you're doing. And Sasha, I do have a question, but I'll hold off because you want to talk about the movie, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys don't mind, I mean, just briefly, because that clip says a lot. That teaser or trailer, they call it, says a lot. Tucker Carlson plays a prominent role in this movie. Devin Nunes is another friend of mine who also plays a prominent role. And of course, members of my family, especially my wife. My wife will be introduced to America for those that watch this film for the first time, really. And very powerful role, very emotional. It's a story of survival. This is a story of fighting and beating the deep state at its own game. And my sister Barbara talks a little bit about that in the film as to how we did that. And there are things that are going to be revealed in this film that I've never spoken about on any show. I've never written about. I've waited until this film to talk to these issues, these points. And it's not, I think people are going to be surprised that it's not just about, Obama and his ilk. There are some other things that get revealed. So it's a great film. I appreciate you highlighting that book there, Scotty, on how to fight artificial intelligence. That's a part of what it is that we're up against. And anyway, how can I help you guys? Because I'm an Irish guy. I come from a tough Irish Catholic family. My father, my mother, they're both deceased. We're 9 brothers and sisters. We were lower middle class type people, hardworking, and we were Democrats of all things, right? I mean, we were Democrats. So, I mean, if people want to put me in a political box, when the metaphor of knowing where the bodies are buried, you don't rise to the level of the most senior intelligence officer in the Department of Defense, running one of the largest intel agencies in the world, nor do you get to be appointed as national security advisor to a duly elected president of the United States, in this case, Donald Trump, and where I was his national security advisor. You don't get to those levels because you're a dummy. You get to those levels because you know certain things and you prove yourself over time, over a lifetime of experience. And you damn right I know where these bodies are buried, and I know how to get to them, and I know who's behind some of this. And it's not about the metaphor of body. That's not it. It's actually budgets and programs and things that are going on in our government. So I'm in a position where I can't do anything about that now. But if I were national security advisor, or if I was, in a very critical position around the president, which I was, I could have done a lot about those things. I do talk about some of this in the movie. and what happened. And I think people are going to watch it. People that don't like Mike Flynn, that do take the time to go watch it, they're going to go, holy crap, I didn't know.
Scotty, your question for General Flynn.
Yeah, General Flynn, I think it's inevitable somehow, some way we're going to see the rightful president return to the scene. And I asked you this in 2021 in jest. You were kind enough to answer it. But ask you again, what I think you can do to help us is serve President Trump, whether you serve him as national security advisor or vice president. If I took a vote who they'd like to see as a new kind of vice president, it would be you, General Flynn, for sure. I bet you'd get 80% of the vote.
Oh, yeah.
Would you be willing to come back and work in a Trump administration in some capacity, NSA director or vice president?
Yeah, so I've been through that process before, where I was on the short list for vice president of the United States back in June of 2016. People can go look it up. There was 4 of us that were remaining on that ticket. It was me, Newt Gingrich, Chris Christie, and Mike Pence. And of course, Trump went with Mike Pence. And I said I had a call with him, and I talk about this on the film a little bit. And so I've been through that process, and obviously I've been through the process where after we won the presidency, he then asked me to serve. So I know how that question comes up, and I know what the process is that you go through. So I go through that background because I want people to understand that I've been there and done that before, right? And so if it was again where President Trump turned to me and said, "I need your help," he's not saying it as just Donald Trump. He's saying it because, and I know this, and you know this, and your audience knows this, our country needs, all of our help. And so I've been a guy who's grown up. I was born on an Army base. I hung around my father when he was in the Army. I joined the Army. I served in the military. I know service, and that's really what I know best. And so if I had the opportunity to serve again, I obviously would serve this country. I'm serving this country right now as you are. And those of us that can serve inside versus outside, we all should, but not to gain favor for ourselves, but to gain, to renew the strength that our country can actually have. And right now we don't have that with the people that are in there. I mean, my God, anybody with a little bit of common sense and paying a little bit of attention can see how damaging this current administration is doing, how much damage they're doing to our country. So, it's a longer answer, but the answer to me is this is what I know. I know service to country. And so I think if I was ever given the opportunity again, I obviously would seriously consider it. And I know the process, and more than likely, I'd probably say, sure, sign me up,
Right. Well, General, I think make that 85 or 90%. Scotty, I think your math is slightly ropey.
Perhaps so.
General, closing question. The Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. To be as reductive about this as I can possibly be, are we looking possibly at tactical warfare, frequency wars? What really is going down here?
Yeah. So on the battlefield, there's an old adage that especially in the intel world, that the first report is always wrong. Okay. So the first report is always wrong. And in this case, when the United States government and resources from the United States government, particularly the FBI agent that had just taken over in Baltimore, when the FBI, when they came out and within an hour, this is not a terrorist attack. This is what, they come out and they tell us, they gave us the first report to say, shut up, go home, nothing to see here. We'll take care of everything. We'll conduct and investigate. I mean, I'm looking at this thing going, wait a second, and I took my own open source research, and I'm looking at everything from, what I do know. And I know quite a bit about maritime operations. I mean, you don't get to where I'm at without having at least a cursory understanding of maritime operations. Plus, I surfed for 50 years. I know tides. I know how water moves. I know how rivers move. I know tides. I know all the kinds of aspects. It was a clear day. It was calm winds. I mean, there's so many things there's so many dots that you cannot connect and still cannot connect. And what we have learned in just the last 72 hours about the ship coming off its moor and taking a tack down the river that was slightly off the tack that, I mean, hundreds of ships have taken. So when the government tells me, you know, you're spewing disinformation, you're spewing misinformation, what the government should have said immediately was, we are going to conduct a full and thorough investigation, and we're going to hold to account anybody that caused this damage. When the president of the United States came immediately out and said, we're going to pay, the federal government's going to pay, we're going to foot the entire bill for this thing. Wait a second. There's insurance. There's big companies. It was a Singapore flag vessel driven by a Ukrainian ship driver. I mean, you know, wait a second. Before we say that the United States taxpayers are going to foot the bill for this entire thing, whatever happened to, you know, holding, you know, these massive, massive companies? By the way, Mitch McConnell's wife's sister, who just died recently a couple of weeks ago, backed into some lake or something, that she wouldn't know anything about. She's deceased now, but the company that she owned that is tied to Mitch McConnell's sister owns this ship. I mean, no. So, okay, conspiracy theory, get all the conspiracy theories out there, folks. What I'm telling you is that what the government should have said was, we're going to have a full and thorough investigation. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And if it was a terrorist incident, if it was a cyber attack to test the waters, quote unquote, to test the waters, if it was a cyber attack to test our system, because when that Francis Scott Key Bridge came down, and it's down, we're talking about 4 or 5 years of repairs. Right. And it not only locks up our commercial activities, and they got to adjust from everywhere from, you know, Bar Harbor, Maine to Narragansett Bay, Rhode Island to Norfolk News, and maybe down into the harbors of Georgia. You know, they got to shift the entire commercial industry of the Eastern Seaboard around. And we have military operations inside of that harbor. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, government, don't tell me that nothing to see here. There's too much evidence that looks otherwise to be a little bit maybe nefarious. I don't know, but I'm just telling you, if I were in the government, okay, if I were up in the level of national security advisor for that government, believe me, I would know exactly what questions to ask. I would know exactly where to look to initially start the look. It's like I said in my ex post when I said it. I said, start with the harbor master. It doesn't mean the harbor master is a bad guy. It just means the harbor master is responsible for the flow of everything going in and out of that bay, going in and out of that harbor. I mean, I know guys that used to do tugboat operations up in Narragansett Bay. Anybody can go look up what Narragansett Bay off of Newport, Rhode Island, brings in and out of. It used to have an entire fleet of naval vessels up there. I knew guys that were the harbor master. I knew guys that drove the tugboats, and I knew guys that they would put on these large container ships to drive it outside of the bay. And then once it got outside the bay, they'd do a transload onto a tug, and the captains would take over and they'd salute and they'd say, "Thank you very much." I mean, this is the kind of detail that I know. So if I know this, then the people that are running these things, I know that they know even more.
Oh yeah.
So it's probably a much longer answer to your question that you wanted.
No. we're getting a lot of lemonade out of you today, General. We're not stopping here. Very, very briefly, can you give us a 1-minute response to this question? You raised the specter of the Black Swan event. Are we looking more to the temporal reality of a jamming of the grid and a engineered collapse of global economics, socioeconomics, or are we looking to the skies to more extraterrestrial notions? Yeah. So, and I wouldn't go to the extraterrestrial route. The nation states of this world that, like China, like Russia, like Iran, North Korea, others, have the full capability to really, if they want to, have a major impact and affect our critical infrastructure. They have the capability to shut our infrastructure down, certainly in pieces and parts of them, no doubt.
Our government, I don't think, and the head of CISA, who I know, Easterly is her name. I know her. She's put out all kinds of warnings about stuff, but yet we still have these problems. We just had another problem over the weekend with another intrusion into a major part of our network. So the answer, and to make the answer short here, yes, there are nation states that have the capability to create some kind of electromagnetic effect or other types of effect on our cyber and critical infrastructure. They absolutely can do that. Are we prepared for that? I don't believe we are prepared for that. I really don't. I think our government will say, of course we are. We can do this. We can stop this. I mean, stuff is happening every single day. And I will tell you, it's happening. There are critical infrastructure cyber attacks to our infrastructure every day to the tune of tens of thousands. Okay? That's what I know. And so we're blocking and tackling constantly, and all an enemy has to do is find the weak point, right? Find the weak point, and they enter. And once they get inside, then they can control and shut down these SCADA systems, right? These SCADA, people can go look up SCADA. It's basically a supervisory control of a data acquisition system. So that means, some of it's man in the loop, some of it's or human in the loop. Some of it's machine to machine. These are things that all exist and can happen. And I do worry about these things every day.
Well, General Flynn, thank you so very much for joining us today on AGN. You are a gentleman. You're assuredly a scholar with 3 degrees behind you, and you're the very best in leadership. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, guys. See ya. Thank you to your audience, too. You got a great audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, Scotty, what a man.
I forgot to have him frame up his famous local action equals national impact, because in the meantime, while all these things are going on, Sasha, we got to stay engaged locally in our backyards and our communities at some level. So very
Scotty,
important.
I'm bring up a guest in here. George Woodham, a very, very warm welcome to you. Very happy to see you. Friends, highly regarded, well-known Dutch journalist, activist, former anti-globalist party political candidate, and executive director of, you're going to have to pronounce this for me, Ongehoord Nederland TV. George recently released an insightful interview with well-known American truth personality Candace Owens, who I've also had the good fortune of spending time speaking with, a remarkable mind in that woman, which was widely acclaimed in the Netherlands, his interview with her. He'll tell us about the truth movement in the Netherlands and Candace's impact, the mass immigration issues and housing shortages there, the looming threat of war, upcoming European elections, and a whole lot more. George, your status quo in the Netherlands and Europe today.
Yeah, well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon to you there, Sasha and Scotty. It's my first time on the show, and I'm not very familiar with your work, but I've been told from good places that you do a really great job. So, Sasha, keep it up and keep it going. Right, so we're here in the Netherlands. Just to correct you there, I'm not the executive director. I don't think my boss would want me to present myself as such. I'm a senior editor at Ongehoord Nederland. That's a Dutch TV station. And as is true, I was in politics before. I did COVID protests, anti-globalist protests. We did that. And I recently had the opportunity of interviewing Candace Owens. She was over in Amsterdam to speak at an event, and we had a chance to have a chat with her. And that's recently gone out on YouTube and on Twitter, and it's had over 400,000 views. So that's really made an impact.
Well, I'm so sorry. I've momentarily lost my screen there. Okay, Scotty. Boom, boom, boom. Forgive me there, Scotty. I'm back again. My screen split. We were hacked this morning, George. Our Starlink went down. 3 independent satellite links went down. I've been having an awful time. And occasionally you see red balloons and things appear on my screen, nothing to do with me. So I'm definitely being hacked today. But Scotty, a question for George from you.
George, how you doing? Great to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on.
Good, Scotty. Thanks.
I've been in mainstream media 40 years. You're a Dutch mainstream, quote, media guy working at a TV station.
Well, we're on the edge there, really.
Yeah.
We're actually paid for by the government, but we don't really fit in the system. So the government is trying to cancel us as we speak. So that's a bit tricky, We're sort of in the system, but we don't really fit in. So we sort of got in by some magic event, and now they want us out again.
You sound like me, in the system, but you don't fit in. So
Exactly,
broadcasting on mainstream media radio stations, I really don't fit in because we talk about these things. But my question is, you've got to be watching the United States of America and shaking your head and wondering what the hell is wrong with the people of the United States. How did they let this happen? Particularly the open borders, which I think you guys have some practice at. You guys have had open borders at one point, didn't several million or a couple 100,000 at least people come into your country from other cultures? What impact did it have? And are you guys just amazed at what's going on here? What are you talking about there about the United? What are you saying about the U.S. in Dutch TV?
Well, that's a lot of questions, Scotty. Yes,
exactly. Scott, there's 9 questions I counted there.
On the open borders, we have open borders here because of the European Union, where there's a thing called the Schengen Treaty. And that means that within the EU zone, all borders, there's a freedom of movement for everybody in there. But that effectively means that our outer border, our southern border, is in the Mediterranean, even though we're in the Netherlands in northwestern Europe. And we got hundreds of thousands of migrants coming over on boats and rafts, and they're all looking for a better future, and they end up here. And we this is a tiny country, just under 18 million people, but we have net migration of 100,000 plus now for the past 6 years, and that is costing us $24 billion annually, and that's just over 6% of all the government's money, all the tax money in the country. That's not something we can keep affording. We have close to 1 million. We need close to 1 million extra houses by 2030. They're young couples, young people unable to start their lives. That 18 to 25-year-olds can't find housing. They can't even find an apartment. And these migrants, they call themselves asylum seekers. They're being put up in hotels at $300, $350 a night, 4-star hotels. That's what they're getting. And our kids, they can't leave mom and dad's house.
Yeah, we have the same thing going on here. Obviously, we have seniors and veterans being removed from housing so they could shovel the illegal immigrants into the housing. It's quite the story. But are you in disbelief, or did you see this coming? Because you've been through a lot of what we're going through. Did you see this coming, or are you in total amazement of what's happening in the United States?
Well, I hear that you have 8 million expected by October illegal migrants. Is that correct?
We may be higher than that, but that's at least, I'd say that's a fair number.
Yeah, well, I've seen the invasion at the southern border. I've seen the masses of people coming across, and Joe Biden opening the border like that. I think that's a security risk. I don't know how you guys view that, but that's got to be a security risk, right?
Oh, it's a national security threat. There's no doubt. And we've been very vocal. We've put on some events at the border in 3 states. We're doing a lot to shine a spotlight on it. That's all we can do, is keep a spotlight shined at it. We can't effectuate closing the borders in any reasonable short order during this Biden administration. Besides which, in one sick way, it's kind of been healthy that it's awakening the masses. There are many people who supported Biden, supported the left, the Democrat, the woke ideology, that are coming around because of this invasion. They see the agenda now. So there is a silver lining in the cloud there, George.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Scotty. The same things happen here in my country, and for that matter, in the rest of Europe as well. These high numbers that we're seeing coming in has really woken a lot of people up to the lies of the left. So people have moved away from what they call centrist parties or centrist left parties, which is, in my book, is straight off communism, most of them, right? And they've moved away from that. And so we're seeing right-wing parties and nationalist parties win across the board in Europe. We've had Geert Wilders, he will not be prime minister. I won't go into that, but he won the elections in November last year, gained nearly a fourth of the vote. So that was massive. That was a really, really big victory for him. The right is set to win in Belgium. They won in Sweden. They're in government in Sweden. Orban in Hungary is doing great. Austria is that's where the right is looking to win as well. We've had Meloni in Italy. She deserves some criticism, as some praise, but some criticism too. But Europe is voting further to the right than it's ever had, I think.
On the matter of nationalism, what's the status with regards to conscription? We hear noises of conscription.
Well, obviously the situation in Ukraine is quite poignant. My tiny country has over 100,000 Ukrainian refugees here. They are being housed at the taxpayers' expense, of course. But there are also billions of euros going towards the front. We're sending all our F-16 fighter jets have been forwarded down there. We've backed them now with 7.2 billion euros in taxpayer money over the past 3 years, and you can see the military boys. They're ramping up the war drum. They're beating the war drum. I mean, they're looking to escalate this conflict. That's all I can say, really. And to be truthful, the mainstream media is backing them up, saying, "Yeah, well, we can't let Putin take over Europe because that's the general narrative." They think, or that's what they're claiming, that President Putin is looking to conquer all of Europe, which I don't really see it that way. But I'm no expert, But
I would say I'm something of an expert as a pundit for 20 years on this particular subject, and Russia has never invaded anything or anyone in its entire existence. So why would it start now? The last time I looked, the Dutch invade, the Portuguese invade, the Spanish invade, the English invade, the French invade, the Germanians invade. The Russians and the Chinese actually don't invade. So this insane and insidious dialectic that's thrown out there by these pernicious Luciferic narratives, the thrall of the Disneys and Nickelodeons and all of their satanic witchery and Babylonian hocus pocus, which underpins mainstream media and mainstream academia. Let's not forget, it's all connected to the Tavistockian agenda, the Fabianist agenda, the famed Bilderberg agenda, which issues really from the crown of the Netherlands. Let's speak momentarily about that. Is the Dutch crown, in your view, also in a state of discombobulation as we see it is in the United Kingdom?
Well, if it is, it's not as evident as it may appear in the UK. But I'm no expert on the Dutch royal family, so I'll have to leave it at that. But I would like to get back in on the draft or conscription, as you were talking about. This is now being tabled as well. It's being suggested, and they're all going, well, we're not really suggesting it, not for real, but just in case Putin, push comes to shove, bad comes to worse, we'll have to go in there. And what they're talking about is sending our boys and girls, those same people that can't afford proper housing, right? They're now looking to send them down to the front to fight some politician's war,
right.
They have nothing to do with. Sasha, excuse me. I'll tell you this: how Prime Minister Mark Rutte, he's been tipped, he's the hot favorite for the top NATO job. This is how he got us into this war. He was at a press conference talking about the Ukrainian conflict, and he said to a reporter, "I said, just for the record, this is our war too." He said to the reporter. And by that statement, apparently our country was at war with Russia. It's amazing, really. Parliament has no say in it, nor does it claim to want to have a say in it. I mean, he wasn't. They didn't call him in and said, "Hang on a minute, let's talk about this first." No, everybody just agrees. Parliament is just a paper tiger in this country.
Part of the globalist deep state, just like here in the U.S. It sounds like a mirror image. Your politicians.
Well, there is only one corporation, Scotty. We now know that there is the parent corporation, but it's deftly propped up historically by the Dutch crown and by the British crown. I would suggest that out of all of the so-called black nobility echelon in Europe, the crowns of Europe and the dominion they've held over the world in the last half a millennium, 500 years at least, the Dutch and the English are, in that sense, the two horns of the devil. The Dutch East India Company, the British East India Company were, don't forget, the corporation that really forged, you know, through the opium trade and the spice trades, ended up establishing what we now know today as the gravest existential threat facing humanity, which is pharmacopoeia, you know, and the insidious agendas of Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates. There is a straight line to the Dutch East India Company, the British East India Company, when you look at it from that eagle's eye perspective. Baseline, Netherlands, what was the response and the impact of Candace Owens' voice to the Dutch ears, as you see it, George?
Well, she spoke at a political event. There were 3,000 people there. It was a sellout, and that was very well received. You know, in this country, the interview we did had, you know, a multiple thousands of views, you know, up to 40,000 before it got some real traction. You know, we had 400,000 views, but that was worldwide. I think in the country, we had 40,000 views. That's quite a lot for an interview of this length on the YouTube in our tiny country. You know, she's a straight talking girl. That's how I would describe her best. You know, she's also very charming and you know, very eloquent and very clever. You know, and it was great talking to her. And she has a message that most people can identify with. I mean, what's wrong with being proud of your country? There used to never ever be anything wrong with being proud of your country. I mean, we talked about this in America. There's anthems everywhere, pledges of allegiance, you know, the stars and stripes flies everywhere in the States, or at least that's how I always viewed it. But apparently nationalism has become like a bad thing. And many people in Europe can identify with that. They are losing their sense of identity because the globalists have decided that you can no longer feel part of a nation, or you can no longer feel part of a community or a town or a province or an area. You know, it's not, you're no longer allowed to be from somewhere, to have your roots there. And this is, yeah,
George, that was what I was alluding to when, you know, speaking about the Bilderberger agenda and how the Fabianist and Tavistokian agendas behind that historically were really all about setting into motion what you're talking about historically, to erase culture, to erase community, to erase society, to erase family, to erase gender, and now, you know, and to monoculturalize the human condition and the human experience under the sword of Damocles of the parent corporation, which can drop any moment it chooses. And
well,
these carry on.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't stake any claim as to understanding what the big plan is here, but in effect, you know, the results are the same as you're painting there. People no longer feel like they belong here. And that is perfect, you know, if you want to move people around, if you want to move them around ideologically, you know, if you want to get them to change their views. And it's not only that, you know, we're in a perfect storm here. This mass migration is bringing in newcomers, people who also don't have any ties to the country, right? And they're coming in, they have no ties to the country other than the hand that's feeding them at the moment, which is the government. And in power are the globalists. So what are they going to do once they get a passport? They're going to vote for the globalists. You know, that's it. They're just bringing in votes. I don't know how that's regarded in America, but I think Joe Biden is bringing in 8 million votes there, and it wouldn't surprise me if they were all in swing states.
Clearly, a big part of the agenda here, George, there's no doubt. Tell me, who's winning the information war in your country? Is the globalist mainstream media winning, or are you and the truther media winning like we are here in America?
Well, the truther media, they've really had a boost during COVID. But I got to say, there's been a bit of a lull in the protest movement, in the truther movement. People have gotten a bit tired, you know, and we're not facing lockdowns, so there's no vaccines being pushed on us anymore. things have quietened down a bit, and so the what I would call the resistance movement, if you want to call it that, is in a bit of a lull, So they've eased off a bit, but they're still there, and and push comes to shove again, I think the same people are going to rise up, But slowly but surely, the mainstream is moving towards the right. The mainstream is moving more towards nationalism, away from globalism, and I think that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing indeed. George Woodham, it's an absolute delight meeting you and speaking to you, and thank you for joining us on AGN today.
Thank you, George.
Sasha and Scotty. Great, thanks. Have a great one.
You too.
Very good. Okie dokie. What a delightful man. Looks like a scholar who leapt off the pages of some Dickensian novel. A very handsome man. Okay, I'm going to introduce our last guest today. Friends, the great Dr. Lynn Lafferty, Doctor of Pharmacy, diplomate, it says, from the American Clinical Board of Nutrition, naturopathic doctor, master herbalist, and most importantly of all, a chef. An endowed professor at Nova Southeastern University, Dr. Lafferty loves to teach and is committed to finding the safest and most effective means to promote health and wellness. And she grew up in Western New York in a small town surrounded by farms with clean air and water, heavenly grass, and pristine food. Those were the days. Gosh, her Italian grandparents lived down the street and had a garden of vegetables and herbs that they cooked with. They knew the medicinal properties of roots and spices long before Dr. Lynn's studies in medicine. And her grandmother had a 150-acre organic farm, or in the 1960s, simply a farm, because they were all organic back in that day before big business, agrochem, stepped in with chemical pesticides and fertilizers and all the shit show that ensued. And this blessed soul recognized the dangers of EMF before most people and refused to have even electricity in her home. I think we're speaking about Dr. Lynn's grandmother there. With an upbringing like that, it's no surprise that she's a champion of true non-synthetic health solutions and natural living, health from within, and looking forward to hearing her ideas about taking back our health. Because, friends, as you all know, health sovereignty is really the cornerstone. It's the bedrock. It is the source code of survival now as we navigate the end of empire. It is a delight to meet you, Dr. Lynn Lafferty. Thank you for joining us on AGN. You'll need to unmute your microphone.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to meet you. I've heard so many great things about you, so thank you.
That's very kind of you. So we're going to have some fun and ask wonderful questions. In the first instance, I think we've all fallen in love with your grandmother in the last few minutes. I mean, what a blessed childhood you had. And yet, I mean, it should be everyone's childhood, eating clean food, breathing clean air, drinking clean water. I mean, it's insane that we look at that as being something special. But indeed, it is something special nowadays because we're so monoculturalized. So what are your thoughts and reflections on where we stand in the year 2024 from when you grew up?
Well, I still have a house up there too, and I still have well water, which is the best water ever. I'm in Florida now, and I'm at a medical school. I'm in my office here, but I still have a home there with the best well water you've ever had. It comes ice cold and it's pristine. It's really clean. Very deep wells that we have in Western New York, really. And my grandmother was we thought she was really a character, but she was climbing ladders and pruning trees when she was 80 years old. But she also knew a lot about politics. She kept her gold from when they were trying to steal it in the 30s. And she would say, because I think it was a Democrat that took the gold. She said, if it was between a dog and a Democrat for dog catcher, I'd vote for the dog. So she was really quite a character. But she never took a medicine until she was 80 because we were in a car accident together and she broke her hip. And this was in 1980 and they said she'd never live. She came out and they said, oh my God, she's got bones like an 80-year-old. And she still didn't want electricity in her house. She finally got a phone when she was 80 years old. So that was a big deal for her. But she made so many, home remedies and would take us on field trips. And the biggest thing for me was COVID, because she had told me that I was probably about 8 or 10 years old, and we were standing by her creek where the elderberry grew. And she told me that she had cured 20 people of the Spanish flu. I don't think she called it the Spanish flu. She said that all these people died in the 20s. And actually, my great-grandmother from Italy, who had come to Buffalo, New York, actually died from the Spanish flu. But she said that our family used elderberry. She had a still too, and that's the best way. Alcohol is the best way to get your herbs out. And so what happened was, when I heard COVID early on, I went to the medical literature, and lo and behold, SARS COVID had broken out. The Middle Eastern version had broken out in a nursing home in 2016, and they used elderberry extracted in alcohol, and in 5 days it was gone. Not one person in the nursing home even went to the hospital, let alone die. And so I had a company do elderberry that way. I treated one of the first congressmen who got it. He was up working in 3 days. He didn't go back to Congress, but also I showed the doctors their stacks, on vitamin D and zinc and all of these different things. And I don't even know if any of my patients got COVID, but none of us, it didn't last very long. The thing that's really scary that I talk about a lot is the curriculum in these schools. That, I have medical students, this is even 10 years ago, before COVID, coming to me and saying that excuse me, I read your notes, I got off track, but saying, Dr. Lafferty, I just spent $500,000, 23 years of my life, and I don't know anything. So just to give you an example, this was the textbook that we had back in the 70s and 80s on medical physiology. So I asked, when I speak, I ask audience, do you ever have a doctor tell you, well, I don't know what's wrong with you? Well, the reason they don't know, this book teaches you how the body works. Why would a doctor need to know how the body works? So they got that out about 12 to 15 years ago. I went to University of Miami, which is also near me. My friend wanted me to speak, and she said, do a lecture based on the textbook. And I would, they don't speak a lot of English. I'm like, no, they show me something a little like paperback book. I said, no, biblioteca muy grande, the physiology. And I went to the main librarian that runs the bookstore, and she said, they don't take physiology anymore. I go, what? She goes, those little books, they cut the body into pieces, and that one she gave you was on the heart, and they'll learn a little bit of heart physiology. I said, but most heart attacks and heart disease come from your adrenal gland. It doesn't have anything to do with the heart. They'll never learn that. And she said, they don't learn anything. Well, then, we used to have big biochemistry books. I had to take 2 years for pharmacy school in biochemistry. That's been taken away because that's the map of the body. And it shows how the nutrition heals your body or makes it work properly. And last year they took anatomy out. So, why would a doctor need to know the difference between a muscle and a ligament? I mean,
arguably because they're growing Morgellons fibers and self-replicating nanodiodes are now growing inside of our bodies. So our bodies in a couple of years will bear little to no resemblance to what's in those old anatomical research books. I mean, I'm being quite serious about that. They are attempting to change the nature of our physiognomy with bad science. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. Yes.
So
sorry, I didn't mean to giggle, but it's so pathetic. It's so pathetic. If you don't laugh, you'd be crying all the time.
Let's speak about the infiltration of pharmacy and the entire subject and spectrum of biology. We've just touched upon it, but big pharma establishing the narrative now that pharmacy schools all around the world are indentured into this false light narrative, and speak about that and how desperately serious that becomes.
Well, serious, let me tell you, COVID was kind of like the best thing and worst thing that happened to us here too, because now people get to see most of this is fake that they told us, right? Well, guess what? Everything in medicine is fake. There's nothing in it that's honest.
Yeah.
The largest study in the history of the world, it's called Framingham. It's been going on since 1948 in Framingham, Connecticut. And the chief of Yale cardiology, he wrote about this about probably 12, 15 years ago, because he was the head of it, that, you know, they want you to have your cholesterol 200 or lower. Actually, it showed women with 230 to 260 cholesterol had fewer heart attacks and strokes than those at lower cholesterol. Blood pressure and by the way, we used bile salts, which were from cow gallbladder, the bile, to lower cholesterol. That's what I still use today. It still works. When I got out of school, there was something called the PDR. I have it at home. I don't have it here, but half of what was in there was natural. For instance, the bile salts for cholesterol, but there was probably 12 companies that made digestive enzymes. Why? Because there's probably 100 studies from the 50s and 60s that show that when you age, you lose digestive enzymes. So you just replace them so that you can digest your food properly. We don't need any of these drugs, basically, that they're talking about. This autoimmune, if you go to Harvard website and you put rheumatoid arthritis, it goes, we have no idea what causes it. Well, if you go to the medical library in the United States, which is called PubMed, put rheumatoid arthritis and gut bacteria, there's over 350 articles. The etiology, which means the cause of rheumatoid arthritis, is gut bacteria. And you can do it for any autoimmune disease. Or you can put a virus in for type 1 diabetes. You can put in the mumps, Coxsackie. All of these things, they're in the medical literature. If you go to Europe, which is actually in Amsterdam, their database is called Science Direct, and you put those in for the rheumatoid arthritis, almost 8,000 studies pop up. So, and P.S., by the way, when you take those bacteria, they're anaerobic bacteria that people used to couldn't see, but now with PCR technology, we can read the DNA left of the bacteria. If you look at the sensitivity, this one lab used to do a lot more. They sold to another company, but you'll see the natural antibiotics kill these bacteria so much better than what the regular antibiotics do. Plus, not only do they kill the bad bacteria, but a lot of them feed the good bacteria, which also kill the bad bacteria. So there's so many things like that. I could go on and on forever, but that's what I know you know Dr. Latipo, and I invited him here to the university. And I think at first he thought I was a little crazy because I showed him all my textbooks, because he's about 20 years younger than me. So I said, you weren't taught all this stuff, but we have to go back. We have to teach people how to think again.
So Dr. Lynn, you gave an instruction and lesson to the Surgeon General of Florida.
He's a great guy.
He is a remarkable soul. I greatly look forward to seeing him in a few weeks' time when I'm back there. As you were speaking, I was just remembering 4 years ago, 2019. 2019, when we did the International Tribunal for Natural Justice's judicial Commission of Inquiry into weaponization of the biosphere. I invited Dr. Robert Young as one of the many doctors and practitioners to come forward and give expert testimony. In fact, we've got a slide here somewhere. There's Dr. Young. I put the question to him during that judicial seating. And the question I put to him was a really simple. Oh, yeah, you can see it's here, the reward for curing cancer. So we were taking his testimony because he was famed for curing cancers, and was then incarcerated, and the entire book thrown at him, and they put him in prison multiple times. In fact, they're trying to do the same to him right now again. But the question I put to him, Dr. Lynn, in the judicial inquiry was, is there a single synthetic molecule that serves humanity? And his answer was categorically no. And because I reduced it down to that, the synthetic molecule, which is really the issue of the Rockefeller-Rothschild kind of covenant 100 years ago, to destroy naturopathy, to destroy herbs and medicines, almost redolent of the sacking of the Saracens and the pagans back in the day, when they went in with St. Patrick and slayed all the druids and the witches and the people who knew, had a relationship with the soil, relationship with herbs and medicines. And it seems to me that that Inquisition continues to this day under the slick guise of the FDA, the CDC, the AMA, and other Saturnian organizations. Do you think we will ever see an exit from the thrall of these agencies?
I really pray so. I would love to go in and help any way I could to do that, because these have just been taken over by non-scientists for one agenda. I don't even know if you know this, but Dr. Fauci, 18 months later, he went on this little podcast of Jennifer Garner's to tell her that he was on vitamin D and zinc. I mean, he didn't tell anybody that, that was worried. To me, COVID deaths it was the disease of fear. I couldn't understand why everybody was afraid of everything, with the COVID, because I only usually watch Food Network and Hallmark Channel, because they all kiss at the end and everything works out. So, but anyway, I can't watch all of that negativity, but I turned on CNN and I saw the clock of death and I'm like, oh my God, no wonder. But one of the things I show my students was when I remember the first Gulf War, you've probably seen this, where they were pretending, and I was really scared, like, oh, they're over in Saudi Arabia and the bombs are coming. And I remember staying up all night, and then you can go on like YouTube or Rumble and see that actually they were in a studio next door and their bomb was made out of paper mache. It's just everything is like that. It's a joke. It's just one big joke.
So, Scotty Sachs, you get the last question for the good Dr. Lynn Lafferty.
Thanks for having me on. You guys are great.
Well, it's an absolute delight. It's our privilege and our honor. Scotty Sachs, you've got the floor.
Dr. Lynn, it's great to meet you, and I love listening to your stories about your grandmother, because my grandfather probably came here about the same time and went to a small town in Wisconsin, Peshtigo, Wisconsin, and he was running a farm with well water and fresh produce and dairy, and the life that we all want to aspire to go back to, that our grandparents lived. Such great stories you have. But you have something really interesting on your website I want you to comment on. You have the term "become a health investigator," and you obviously have some coursework that should be available to the world through our own education system, but it takes a good doctor like you to put it out there. Before you talk about that, though, why do you think doctors during the pandemic did not come forward in masses, stayed largely silent? There were a few doctors, isolated as they may be, that came out and were very vocal in media, but why did the masses of doctors stay below the radar? Was it just fear of losing a license, fear of losing money?
It's not even COVID. They're programmed with nothing. They're programmed with nothing. They don't have basic science. They don't know physiology. They don't know pharmacology. When I got out of school, you didn't worry that a prescription drug was going to cause cancer, sudden death, whatever. You didn't worry about that. Today, So doctors took a year of pharmacology. So you'd think today, because the drugs are so much more dangerous, you look in these package inserts, they cause sudden death, all these things, they take eight weeks, and it should be called shut the front door. This is what Big Pharma wants you to know. They don't know a side effect. The dean of the medical school called me in and said, oh, you're at it again. 2 of the professors from the science department called and said you're lying to the faculty. I mean, the fact that Lipitor causes diabetes, and he said, yes. I said, it's in the package insert. It's in the Annals of Internal Medicine 2002. How about not in the May edition? How about not worrying about me? How about the fact that your science department that are teaching our children haven't read a journal in 20 years? We had this great thinking. A matter of fact, when I walked in the school, they said 1/3 of you will be flunked out. And my physiology professor, I'm very good at what I do because I didn't flunk out. She taught us the body is totally logical, and that when you follow that logic sequencing, you can figure out anything. And when you have the products to use, like one guy that had, one of our people here had a genetic disease that causes tumors in his brain and they die easy. I said to my students, go find what protein he's not making. They said it's called tuberculin. I said, go and find a plant or animal tissue that might be high in tuberculin. And guess what? Pig brain. And I said, well, guess what Dr. Lafferty's got? I got pig brain, Tim. They go, what? I go, yeah, I got pig brain. This man in 6 years, I was hoping the tumors would have shrunk. They didn't, but they haven't grown any. And so this is the kind of thinking that nobody has. I just taught a couple of months ago, 100 students in integrative medicine. And these are students that are trying to think outside the box. I said, how many of you went to the medical library when you heard COVID looking for something that might help you? Not one of them raised their hand. And I remember in school, we saw the first pancreatic cancer case, and the doctors were saying, go to the medical library, and we had to actually get a journal back then. There was no computer. Get the journal. Maybe there's something we're missing. The doctors wanted, what am I missing? How can I help the patient? No, now let Dr. Fauci, he's the only one that's allowed to tell you what to do. And this is what's frightening, is that the kids know it when they're coming out. I'm sorry I get so excited about it, but it's so upsetting. And to tell you the truth about my course, I wanted to teach, I teach this to moms. You know, some men join too. I love having men in there, but mostly are moms looking for other things for their children to do. And honestly, they know more than the medical students do when they graduate. It's a very sad thing. I want to teach them how to read the medical literature or look for alternative things, like the rheumatoid arthritis. That's something you probably didn't even know about. But if you put in Google and put Google Scholar, there's a lot of things that pop up. So there's so many things out there that we have in our kitchen that killed COVID. That's all I can.
Well, Dr. Lynn Lafferty, thank you so very much for joining us today on AGN. Scotty Sachs, thank you, brother, for anchoring so beautifully. And friends out there, we're drawing to the end of this broadcast. For joining us. Indeed, we'll be back again within a couple of weeks. I'll be on the road, I think, somewhere in North America, and bid you farewell until then. All right. Thank you, friends. Over and out.